When I was 9, my world quietly split in two. My parents, kind, gentle, and to my young mind unbreakable, sat me down and told me they were getting divorced. I remember their voices being soft, like they were trying not to shatter me. And in a way, they succeeded. Because even though they separated, they never stopped loving me. They shared custody equally, weekdays with mom near school, weekends with dad in the suburbs. It wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful. That peace didn't last long. 2 years later, Dad met Gina. I still remember the first time he brought her over. A sunny Sunday afternoon, grilled burgers, and awkward small talk. Gina was warm and polite, and Dad seemed happier than I'd seen him in years. I wanted to like her. I tried to like her. She had twin daughters, Emma and Emily, a few years older than me. They were loud, whiny, and dramatic. Teenagers who had grown up without a dad and didn't seem interested in having a stepbrother. I was an introverted 12-year-old, quiet and observant. They were chaos in pink hoodies and glittery cell phones. When Dad and Gina got married, even Mom came to the wedding. She smiled the whole time, holding my hand tightly when I got overwhelmed by the noise. That day, I thought, maybe this will be okay. I couldn't have been more wrong. For the first few months, everything seemed normal. Gina smiled at me, asked about school, and pretended to be the picture of kindness. But then, one morning, while Dad was out grabbing coffee, she sat me down at the kitchen table and dropped the mask. "I don't like you," she said, her smile gone, "but we'll pretend for your father's sake." I was stunned. I didn't know what to say. I just stared at her, unsure if she was joking. She wasn't. She leaned in closer, her voice like ice. "When he's not around, stay out of my way. You remind me too much of your mother, and I hate your mother." That was the first crack. The first moment I realized something was wrong. But it got worse, so much worse. The twins caught on quickly. They mocked me constantly. My clothes, my height, my quietness. They'd say things like, "Dad doesn't even love you. You're just a reminder of the past." When I cried and told Mom, she was furious. She called Dad that night, demanding answers. Dad, bless him, didn't want to believe it. "Gina would never say that," he insisted. "You must have misunderstood." And so the lies started taking root. The next weekend, when I showed up at Dad's house, Gina greeted me with a smile in front of him, but the moment he walked out of the room, her face changed. "If you tell your mom again," she hissed, "I'll make sure you never see your dad again. I'll divorce him and take everything. He'll have nothing, all because of you." I was 12, just a kid, and terrified. So I stayed quiet. I kept the peace. I endured. Every Friday after school, dread filled my stomach like wet cement. I tried to come up with excuses not to go. Fake stomach aches, school projects, anything. But Dad didn't understand. He'd call and sound sad when I wouldn't show up, and I couldn't bring myself to tell him the truth. Because I still loved him. Because I didn't want to break him. Because I was still holding on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, things would get better. But they didn't. They only got darker. By the time I turned 13, Gina had made it her mission to make me feel like a stranger in my own father's home. Every weekend visit turned into a mental war zone. She'd say things that felt like paper cuts at first. Quick, sharp, and dismissive. "You're too skinny," she'd whisper. "No wonder no one likes you." Then she'd flip her tone the moment my dad entered the room, all sugary smiles and fake warmth. "Oh, he's such a good kid, isn't he?" It was psychological whiplash, and I was trapped in the middle. The twins, Emma and Emily, followed her lead like shadows. They'd mock everything from my haircut to how I laughed. They called me half-brother instead of my name, and told me Dad only brought me around out of guilt. I started believing them. At that age, when the people around you say something enough times, you start thinking it might be true. Dad? He didn't see it, or maybe he didn't want to see it. He thought our family was blending well. He'd force me to go shopping with them, hoping we'd bond. Gina would use his credit card to buy her girls entire outfits while I stood in silence, watching them twirl in front of the dressing room mirrors. I once asked for a hoodie. She looked at me and said, "Ask your mother." I'm not your bank. She never let me order a full meal when we went out. Soup, or maybe a side of mashed potatoes if I was lucky. "You're too sensitive," she'd smirk, sipping her wine. "You don't need a full plate." Meanwhile, the twins feasted, laughing as I pushed my spoon through watery broth, and every night I'd go to bed hungry in that big, cold house. I remember one night in particular. I was 14. We had just gotten back from a family dinner and I had barely eaten. My stomach growled so loudly it hurt. I tiptoed to the kitchen to sneak a granola bar from my backpack. I hadn't even unzipped it before Gina appeared behind me in her robe like a ghost. "What do you think you're doing?" she hissed. "Go back to bed. You don't get to steal food in this house." I didn't say a word. I just nodded and returned to the guest room. The door didn't have a lock, so I pushed a chair up against it that night, just for some small illusion of safety. Then I cried into the pillow, muffling the sobs so no one could hear. Not that anyone would have cared. It wasn't just emotional, it was calculated isolation. She'd schedule family movie nights without me, plan little road trips and say there wasn't enough room in the car. Sometimes she'd outright lie to Dad and say I didn't want to come. I tried telling him once. I said I didn't feel welcome in his home. He laughed. "Son, you're overthinking it. Gina cares about you, she just has a different way of showing it." Different, I wanted to scream, but I didn't, because deep down I still wanted him to see me, to choose me. I learned to hide it. I smiled when I needed to, kept my head down, said thank you even when I was being humiliated. My mom knew something was wrong, she always did, but I never told her everything. I was too scared that Gina would keep her promise, that she'd make my dad choose, and I knew if it ever came to that, he wouldn't choose me. When I was 14, my dad surprised us all with a family vacation to Greece. A once-in-a-lifetime trip, he said, something to bring the family together. I didn't want to go. By then, weekends at his house felt more like a punishment than a visit, but Mom encouraged me. She said it might be a chance to reset, to maybe find a sliver of peace. So I packed my bag and boarded the flight with a knot in my stomach. Greece was beautiful. Blue skies, historic ruins, postcard-perfect beaches. But even paradise can feel like prison when you're stuck with people who make you feel like you don't belong. From day one, Gina turned on the charm. She played the doting stepmom in front of my dad, asking about school, telling waiters I was such a smart boy, even snapping fake smiling selfies with me. But the second we were alone, her sweetness vanished like mist in the sun. At breakfast, she'd slide cutting remarks between bites of croissant. "Oh, you're having 2 eggs? Bold choice for someone your size." Then she'd chuckle, pretending it was a joke. The twins joined in, calling me meathead and whispering behind menus, loud enough for me to hear. It was death by 1,000 digs, and my dad just let it happen. When I finally pushed back, said I didn't appreciate the teasing, he told me I was being too sensitive. Gina smiled and said, "See? No sense of humor." That was the moment I broke. It happened at the pool. We were at a seaside resort on Santorini and the heat was blistering. I had just climbed out of the water when Gina, wearing a sun hat and an attitude, said loudly, "You know, maybe basketball's not the sport for you. Height doesn't make up for clumsiness." The twins laughed. I snapped. "You know what?" I said, towel still dripping in my hand. "You talk a lot for someone who wears a shrug over a bikini and still can't hide her stomach. You look like a penguin." The silence was instant. Her mouth opened, but no words came. She turned bright red and stormed back to the hotel room. "Emma and Emily? They looked like I'd slapped their mom in public." "You're disgusting," one of them hissed. "She's a woman. That's body shaming." I didn't care. Not anymore. For years, I had taken everything quietly. Every insult, every manipulation, every fake smile. But in that moment, I felt a strange sense of power. For the first time, I had said something they couldn't ignore. Later that evening, my dad pulled me aside, furious. "I raised you better," he said. "You never speak to a woman like that." "She mocks my body every single day," I fired back. "She calls me ugly. She makes me eat soup while they eat steak. But I say one thing, and I'm the problem?" He stared at me, confused and conflicted. "You need to apologize," he said quietly. So I did. I apologized to the woman who had crushed my spirit for years, and she smiled, smug, victorious. That night, I called Mom from the hotel hallway. I sat on the floor with my knees drawn up to my chest, phone pressed to my ear, and cried. I told her everything about the restaurant meals, the teasing, the threats. I heard her breathing grow tight on the other end. "I'm calling your father," she said. And that was the moment everything started to change. I wish I could say things got better after Greece, but they didn't. If anything, Gina just got smarter with her cruelty. She knew I had told my mom. She also knew my dad didn't believe me. From that point on, she made sure her torment stayed just out of sight. Whispers behind closed doors, subtle digs at family dinners, turning the twins against me more with every visit. The moment I turned 18, she stopped pretending to tolerate me altogether. I only visited my dad's house a handful of times after that. And every time, Gina found new ways to make me feel unwelcome. She'd exclude me from meals, barge into my room without knocking, and complain loudly about how lazy I was if I dared sleep past 8 a.m. Still, I held out hope that one day my dad would see the truth. That hope died on the night I turned 21. It was supposed to be a special trip. Dad called a week earlier and asked me to come home. He said he had big news to share with the whole family. Mom was skeptical, but encouraged me anyway. "He's still your dad," she said. "Maybe he's finally coming around." I landed late Friday and was surprised when Dad greeted me at the airport with a hug. For a second, I felt like a kid again. Like maybe, just maybe, this would be the weekend I got my father back. That hope didn't last long. At dinner, Dad gathered everyone around the table, me, Gina, the twins, and shared his big announcement. He'd finalized his will. He left the house to Gina. That didn't bother me. He gave the joint bank account to the twins. Fine. Then he turned to me and said he was leaving me his entire retirement account and his prized vintage Mustang. That car was everything to him. His pride and joy, something we used to tinker with together in the garage when I was little. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It wasn't the money, it was the recognition. Finally, a gesture that said, "You matter to me." Gina's smile faded. The twins looked furious, and then, like clockwork, Gina burst into tears. I froze. She sobbed that she couldn't keep it in anymore, said she'd been protecting the family by staying silent, and then, in front of my father, she claimed that I had assaulted her. She said it started after Greece, that I'd leer at her, try to walk in on her in the bathroom, that I'd made her feel unsafe every time I came over. It was a story spun with surgical cruelty, lies wrapped in a mother's trembling voice. I sat there stunned. I'd never even been alone in a room with her since I was a teenager, never touched her, never even looked at her longer than I had to. But there she was, weeping into my dad's shoulder, painting me as some kind of monster. When I tried to speak, the twins jumped in, shouting over me, calling me a predator, a freak. My dad didn't yell. He just looked at me and then said the words I'll never forget. "I think it's best you leave until we figure this out." That was it. He chose her. I packed my things in silence and booked a one-way flight back to Mom's. I remember standing in the driveway next to the car he once promised would be mine, staring up at the house I thought I'd always have a place in. And then I turned my back on all of it, not just the house, but my father. When I got back to Mom's house after that nightmare weekend, I didn't say a word for hours. I just sat on the edge of my childhood bed, staring at the wall like I was waiting for my brain to catch up with my body. My mom hovered nearby, not pushing, just there. She always had this quiet strength, the kind that doesn't demand answers but waits until you're ready to speak. When I finally told her what happened, her face changed. I've never seen my mother look that furious and heartbroken at the same time. I had to grab her hand to stop her from storming out to my dad's house right then. But I couldn't let her get involved. Not with Gina. That woman had already twisted one parent against me. What if she came for my mom next? So I made a decision that night. I cut my father out of my life, and for the next 7 years, I disappeared from that side of the family completely. The fallout was worse than I expected. Within days, my dad's side started calling. At first, it was polite concern. "What happened, and can we talk?" But once Gina got to them, it turned into accusations. My aunt left me a voicemail calling me a sick pervert. My cousins unfollowed me on social media. No one, not one of them, asked for my side of the story. They just believed Gina because she cried harder and louder. I changed my number. I blocked them all. But the damage didn't stop there. Gina and the twins started sending me emails from fake addresses, vile, mocking messages, calling me names, warning me to stay away from Dad and that I'd lost. Gina even threatened to take legal action if I ever tried to stir up drama. I fell into a deep depression. There's no other word for it. I stopped going out. I quit the basketball league I loved. I nearly dropped out of college. There were days I didn't get out of bed. Nights I cried until my chest ached from the pressure. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the fear, the constant gnawing anxiety that Gina might accuse me of something again, that any woman could, that all it took was one lie and I'd lose everything. My reputation, my freedom, my future. I was 21 and already afraid to live. But my mom never let go. She moved in with me for a while when she noticed how bad things were getting. She cooked, cleaned, sat with me through my silence. When I finally opened up and told her everything Gina had done since I was 12, she wept. She apologized for not seeing it sooner. And she stayed. Over time, I rebuilt. I got a job in software development, slowly climbing my way into stability. I started therapy, even though it took months before I could say Gina's name without freezing. I found my peace in small things, quiet Sunday mornings, long walks, cooking dinner just the way I liked it, without being judged for eating a full meal. And then, I met Mara. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party. She laughed at one of my dumb jokes when nobody else did. She didn't flinch when I told her I had trust issues. She listened, asked questions, and never once made me feel like I had to earn her belief. For the first time in years, I began to believe that maybe I wasn't broken beyond repair. It was a Tuesday afternoon, gray skies, drizzle on the windows, the kind of weather that pulls your mood down just a little. I was home early from work because Mara had insisted I start taking more personal time, and I was sitting at the kitchen table sorting through unopened mail when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Something told me to pick up. "Hello?" I said, cautious. There was a pause, then a voice I hadn't heard in 7 years. "Hey, it's me, your dad." My chest tightened like someone had clamped it shut. For a moment I couldn't breathe. He sounded different, older. His voice carried weight, not just age, but regret. He started by asking if I was okay, said he'd been trying to find me for a while. I should have hung up, but curiosity kept me frozen. And then, out of nowhere, he broke. He cried. Not the kind of crying that comes from sadness alone, but guilt. Deep, overwhelming guilt. "I was wrong," he said, choking on the words. "I was so wrong about everything, about you." He told me that Gina had cheated on him, not just once, but for years with his best friend. Apparently, after he caught them together in his own house, Gina finally confessed everything, including that she had made up the assault story to manipulate him, that she had always hated me, that she knew I was in the will and wanted everything for her daughters. She said it was all a lie, my dad whispered. "Every word. I threw you out of my life over a lie." He told me he'd filed for divorce, that Gina walked away with nothing, that he'd tried to reach me the day the divorce was finalized, but couldn't find a number, an address, anything, that he waited until he had cleaned up his mess to finally come to me. "I want to fix this," he said. "I want my son back." I sat in silence, tears sliding down my cheeks. Not because I wanted him back, but because part of me, the child in me, had always wanted to hear him say those words. But it was too late. I told him as calmly as I could, "You didn't lose me when she lied. You lost me when you believed her without asking me once. You left your son to rot so your wife could keep smiling." He tried to argue, to say he was manipulated, that love made him blind. I didn't care. "She told you I assaulted her, and you didn't even ask me if it was true," I said, my voice cracking. "You chose her lies over me." He sobbed again, told me he'd do anything to make it right, that he had changed his will, that he wanted to see me again, that he'd go to therapy, that he just wanted a second chance. But some wounds cut too deep to be stitched back together. "I'm happy now," I told him. "I have a job I love, a woman who respects me, and a mom who never gave up on me. I don't need a dad who only shows up after the storm's passed." Then I hung up, blocked the number, and sat there in silence. I thought I'd feel relief, maybe even closure. Instead, I felt numb. Mara found me at the table an hour later, phone in hand, staring at nothing. She knelt beside me, her hand over mine. "You okay?" she asked gently. I nodded slowly. He knows the truth now. And? And it doesn't change what he did. She pulled me into a hug, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to mourn. Not the man my dad had become, but the father I'd never really had. The next morning, I called my mom and asked her to come visit for the weekend. I didn't explain why, just said I needed her here. She didn't ask questions, she just booked her flight. When she arrived 2 days later, I picked her up from the airport with Mara in the passenger seat. The three of us had dinner at home that night. Quiet, warm, familiar, but I could feel it bubbling under the surface, this storm of memories I had kept locked away for years, the truth I had buried so deep, even Mara didn't fully know. After dinner, I sat them both down on the couch. I took a deep breath, staring at the floor. "I need to tell you everything," I said, my voice trembling. I started from the beginning, back to when I was just a scared 12-year-old boy and Gina first told me she didn't like me, how she only pretended to be kind when my dad was around, but behind closed doors, she made it clear I was unwelcome in that house, how she told me I reminded her of my mom and threatened to destroy my dad if I ever said a word. I talked about the verbal abuse, the silent dinners, the cruel comments about my weight, my face, the way she'd forced me to eat soup while everyone else had steak. The nights I cried myself to sleep, the vacations where her smile hid daggers, the time she screamed at me for sleeping in and called me lazy, even though I'd been up cleaning the house. The way she barged into my room without knocking, the shame, the fear, the constant anxiety that I was never enough. I told them everything, every last detail. By the time I finished, my throat was raw, my hands were shaking, and there were tears running down my face. My mom was crying too. She had her hand over her mouth like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Why didn't you ever tell me all this?" she whispered. "Because I was scared," I said. Scared of what Gina would do. Scared Dad wouldn't believe me. And then when she accused me of assault, it didn't even matter anymore. He picked her. He let me go. Mara had tears in her eyes too. She reached over, took my hand and squeezed it tightly. "You didn't deserve any of that," she said. "You were a kid. You should have been protected, not punished." Mom leaned in and pulled me into a hug, tighter than she had in years. "I am so sorry you had to carry this alone," she whispered. And in that moment, something inside me cracked. Something I'd kept buried under layers of silence, shame, and survival. I cried in my mother's arms like I was 12 years old again. But this time, I wasn't alone. That weekend changed something in me. I finally felt seen. I stopped feeling like I needed to justify my decision to cut my father out. I stopped wondering if I was cruel for not accepting his apology. I had lived through years of gaslighting, of emotional torment, of being made to feel invisible and unlovable, and I survived it. My healing didn't come from my father's guilt. It came from finally telling my truth. From knowing that the people who mattered most, my mom and Mara, believed me, stood by me, and saw me for who I really was. And for the first time, I started to believe it too. It's been 6 months since I last heard my father's voice. 6 months since I blocked his number, deleted the messages from his side of the family, and finally gave myself permission to move forward without carrying the weight of their guilt. In that time, something amazing happened. I started living. I don't mean just existing, going to work, paying bills, going through the motions. I mean really living, laughing freely, sleeping without the tightness in my chest, smiling at the thought of tomorrow instead of dreading it. A few weeks ago, I asked Mara to marry me. It was quiet, just the two of us in the park near our apartment, sitting on a weathered bench beneath the oaks where we always share coffee on Sunday mornings. I didn't even get on one knee. I just looked at her, heart pounding, and asked, "Will you keep building this life with me?" She didn't hesitate, just smiled through tears and said, "Always." I never thought I'd feel this kind of peace, not after everything Gina took from me, not after my father chose her lies over my truth. But here I am. We've started planning a small wedding. No giant guest list. No extended relatives trying to fake smiles or fix what they broke. Just the people who showed up when it mattered. My mom, Mara's sister, a few close friends who stood by me when I was drowning. We're also looking at homes closer to my mom's neighborhood, somewhere with a good school district, not because we're rushing into kids, but because we want the foundation ready when the time feels right. And more than anything, I want our future children to grow up never questioning whether they are wanted or enough. I've also been in therapy regularly. At first it was terrifying to open up to a stranger, but now I leave each session feeling lighter. I've stopped blaming myself for what Gina did. I've stopped wondering why my father didn't defend me. That was never about me. That was about who they were and who they weren't capable of being. The therapist helped me understand something powerful. Forgiveness is not the same as access. I can release the rage, the sadness, the ache, without ever letting them back in. And that's exactly what I've done. My father still tries to reach out, through emails, through extended family, through old friends. He says he wants to make amends, that he regrets everything, that Gina ruined his life too, but regret is not redemption. He may have lost his wife, his money, his reputation. But I lost a father long before that. He didn't just fail to protect me, he helped destroy me. And now that I've rebuilt myself, I won't hand him the hammer again. I've come too far. So this chapter of my life ends not with revenge, not with reconciliation, but with freedom. I am not the scared boy who cried himself to sleep anymore. I am a man building a life filled with truth, love, and laughter. And to anyone out there who's been told their voice doesn't matter, who's been pushed aside, disbelieved, or discarded, know this. You don't owe anyone your peace just because they share your blood. Sometimes family is chosen, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away and choose yourself.